So we've been talking about the problem of defining knowledge, problem of answering the question what knowledge is, and we've been discussing a couple of proposals for this, neither of which turned out to be terribly satisfactory. One is the proposal that knowledge is simply belief, the other the proposal that knowledge is true belief. Now we come to a third possibility, which is the claim or the proposal that knowledge is justified true belief. So according to this view, you know the proposition P, just in case you believe the proposition, you're justified in that belief, and P is true. Alternatively, justified true belief is both necessary and sufficient for knowledge. This idea of knowledge is justified true belief has a long history in philosophy. It can be traced back, perhaps, to the work of Plato, in the ancient philosophical tradition, and it's been very important in terms of thinking about the nature of belief ever since. In thinking about this idea, we should make clear that justification consists in, from this point of view, having good reasons for believing something. So, as we suggested earlier, you have good reasons for believing something on condition that your belief comes from reliable sources, more or less reliable sources. Of course, reliability admits of degrees, but reliable enough sources. So, for example, you might think of visual perception as delivering this sort of justification. Visual perception isn't perfect, sometimes it gets things wrong, but by and large it's a pretty good guide to the way the world is. Memory might be said to be similar. Testimony, what other people say about the way the world is, provided those people are more or less reliable. Intuition is the kind that delivers verdicts about thought experimental scenarios. And introspection are all possible or plausible sources of justification or evidence for the truth of our beliefs. Now, the idea that knowledge is justified true belief, again, has a very storied history, and it's a very nice idea, but it's not without its difficulties. In particular, the philosopher Edmund Gettier presented the following thought experiment, which puts very heavy pressure on the theory. The thought experiment goes like this. One of your friends shows you the bill of sale for a Ferrari. The bill has your friend's name on it. So on the basis of looking at that, you come to the conclusion that at least one of your friends owns a Ferrari. You might arrive at that conclusion from the initial inference that your friend in particular has a Ferrari. In any case, your belief to the effect that at least one of your friends owns a Ferrari is true. But it's not true for the reason you think. It turns out the bill of sale that your friend showed you is fake. It's a forgery. Your friend doesn't actually own a Ferrari. He was just pranking you. But it turns out that unbeknownst to you, somebody else you know, another friend, does own a Ferrari. You've never seen the bill of sale for that, which is, as it turns out, legitimate. But nonetheless, it's true that at least one of your friends owns a Ferrari. Question. Do you know that at least one of your friends owns a Ferrari? Now, when presented with this thought experiment, most people say, no, you don't know that at least one of your friends owns a Ferrari. Now, why is this so interesting? It's interesting because it presents to us, in a different guise, the same problem we saw with the TV theory. The problem of epistemic luck. In this case, you believe that at least one of your friends owns a Ferrari. That belief happens to be justified. You have good reasons for thinking that one of your friends owns a Ferrari. And the belief in question is true. So if the JTB theory is true, then you know at least one of your friends owns a Ferrari. But you don't know that. At least intuitively, it doesn't seem like you do know that. Conclusion, the JTB theory is false. So this is a really striking result in epistemology, and it sent people scurrying in all kinds of different directions, trying to revise their account to accommodate this kind of case. Now we might think perhaps that the issue here has to do with justification, and that seems like a very plausible supposition. The assumption that your belief is justified in this case could be challenged, but exactly how that challenge is to be based is a further question. One might think about knowledge in a slightly different way. One might suggest that justification really doesn't have anything to do with it. We might think that knowledge is suitably caused true belief. On this account, what's going wrong in the Gettier case is that what makes the claim true is not what caused the person to believe it, the claim in question being that someone who you know, who's a friend of yours, owns a Ferrari. That's not what makes the claim true. So we might think that that's the way to do things, and that's the way to get us around the problem. The difficulty with this suggestion, though, is it runs into another thought experiment, which appears to show that the alternative proposal, the causal theory, is false. And this is the philosopher Alvin Goldman's thought experiment involving fake barns. So imagine somebody is driving through the countryside with his son, and the countryside is dotted with these structures that look like barns. So the driver, his name is Henry, points out the window and says, "That's a barn." Let's imagine the situation that the structure that Henry's pointing to actually is a barn. But we're going to further imagine that it's the only real barn in the countryside through which they're driving. The other structures that look like barns are actually not barns. They're barn facades. They're fake barns. There's no real barn there. It's just the appearance of barn, the front surface of the barn. So, even though the son's belief that the object that's been pointed out is a barn is caused by a real barn, and that's true, most people would say that he doesn't know that it is. But that's problematic from the view of the causal theory, because the causal theory tells us that the son should know that the object that's been pointed to is a barn. After all, it's been caused in the right sort of way. But again, intuitively, to most people thinking about this situation, there's no knowledge. An alternative possibility to the causal theory, an alternative as well to the JTB theory, is what's known as the reliability theory. In this view, reliably produced true belief is knowledge, and knowledge is reliably produced true belief. The difference between knowledge and just ordinary true belief is that some beliefs are not just true, but produced by some kind of reliable means. And the diagnosis of the Gettier problem with the Ferrari is that the beliefs in question were not produced by reliable means. Remember, the source of the belief in that case was the invoice that was produced by the person who was engaged in the deception. So there was a lack of a reliable means of production of the belief. And that seems like an alternative way of going about things that solves the Gettier problem, and arguably also allows us to handle Goldman's case of the fake barns. However, once again we run into an obstacle. And this is another thought experiment due to the philosopher Keith Lehrer, who introduced this idea of a human thermometer, who he called Mr. Truetemp. So this hypothetical character, Mr. Truetemp, has a thermometer, a temperature monitoring device implanted in his skull that causes him to have beliefs about the temperature, which are reliable. It's a very reliable mechanism, and he gets his beliefs about the temperature are correct, by and large. And suppose further that Mr. Truetemp never actually goes around checking to see whether his beliefs about the temperature, which just arise in him automatically, as it were, non-reflectively, he never goes about figuring out whether or not those beliefs are true. Still, as a matter of fact, the beliefs happen to be true, and the beliefs are produced by a reliable means, this temperature monitoring device which has been implanted in him. Does Mr. Truetemp know the temperature? He has beliefs about the temperature. His beliefs tend to be true, and his beliefs are reliably produced. They have a source that's reliable. When most people presented with this thought experiment think about the situation described, they will answer this question in the negative. They'll say, no, Truetemp doesn't know the temperature, suggesting, again, that there's something problematic about the idea that knowledge can be understood or defined in terms of reliably produced true belief. There seems to be some further aspect to knowledge that is not captured by this account. And it's the search for a further aspect to the account that epistemologists need to be looking for in order to fundamentally solve this problem.